Oh, so we're back live, and this is the Agricultural Committee, and we just finished up earlier this morning with a group from the school day here in the legislature, and we took a little break after that was over, and we have Ryan Hatch with us from the agency. He's the land use policy manager there. And Ryan, we've got several new members, and so we'll introduce ourselves.
Brian Collmore from the Rutland District. Good to see you.
Hi, Irene Renner, Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you, Brian Campion.
Rich Westman and Bobby Star. So do you still look after the ecosystems and all that, Ryan?
Yes, Chair Starr, for the record, Ryan Patch with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Yes, climate change, agricultural climate change considerations, intersection with the Climate Council and the Climate Action Plan, ecosystem services, and then the land use programs that the Agency of Agriculture has a role in, including Act 250, Section 248, current use, land use conservation. That is the kind of auspices of my new role in this position as the Agriculture, Climate, and Land Use Policy Manager.
Oh, that's a long title.
A lot of nouns in there.
That'd be important.
Well, it's definitely important topics. I'm just happy to be able to work on, I think, some pretty compelling and important topic areas. And there's a whole team, of course. I'm just here talking for a lot of folks that are very involved in these areas of work, both at the agency, the farmers themselves, and partners throughout state government and other organizations and interested parties in the state.
Yeah. And well, we've enjoyed working with you over the years on the water quality and building better soils and all that stuff. And so you can give us a little overview on how that's going, and where we came from, and
Where we're headed. Absolutely, Chair Starr, I appreciate the opportunity. I will share my screen. I like presentations because they, I talk a lot. Let's see if this is being shared. Excellent. And it just helps, underscore some of the hopefully points that I try to make. I appreciate that introduction. Right in my previous role, Assistant Director, Water Quality Division, I think Vermont is very lucky, and this is the punchline of the whole presentation, in that the work that our farmers are doing to improve water quality also has co-benefits for both climate change mitigation, which includes sequestration and emission reductions, but also to build resilience, both within the farm landscape, also for our food supply, and also for the watersheds in which farmers operate. And so it's a really, I think, in my view, important nexus to try to highlight. There's a lot of really good work happening here. There have been some significant investments the state have made recently in this space, and I'm hoping to just talk about the framework that was envisioned by the Climate Action Plan and how the state is looking to implement that and track and report on the success of the environmental work farmers are doing, because there's a lot of co-benefits. You focus on phosphorus reductions and water quality benefit. Well, lo and behold, as you apply conservation tillage, cover crop rotation, nutrient management, each one of those has an emission reduction coefficient that can be counted to some degree or another for climate change mitigation. So that's hopefully where we will end up today. And I always like to start, as I did with the Payment for Ecosystem Services overview, just to attempt to orient the committee and myself to the current land use breakdown of the state. The 73% forest and 12% agriculture historically was flipped, of course, around the turn of the 20th century, from the 1800s and 1900s. And now we've had a lot of afforestation, and agriculture currently represents about 12% of Vermont's land base spread throughout all of the counties. But this in the Agriculture Ecosystem Subcommittee and a lot of the work that as I'll talk about, that subcommittee was engaged in, where I was able to participate in that work, the co-chairs. So this is the Vermont Climate Council co-chairs, Abby Corson and Phil Foster.
May I just interrupt for a second? Can you go back to that first slide?
Absolutely.
So 2% development, the state 73% forest, 12% ag. So 2% of what is developed of the entire state. Is that's what I'm trying to.
Yes, 2%, as I read this.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can't see the bottom because it's showing my taskbar. I apologize.
It's okay.
Which is the source from it, Forest Parks and Rec. Yes, this remote sensing exercise shows that 2% of Vermont's border, this includes both water as at 4% and the land base. But if you took that whole area, 2% of Vermont's area is impervious surface or developed.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
And the percentage, Ryan,
Thank you.
100 or 150, 200 years ago was kind of the other way
Yes,
with the sheep and all that.
exactly. We were, Vermont was farming in places that probably wasn't advisable to, on some very steep slopes.
Yeah.
And there are some photos of the State House, and you can see this whole hillside
Yeah.
is completely, a pasture.
Yeah.
So,
Was pasture?
well, it looks like a pasture to me. It looks too steep to cultivate. So I'm assuming, I didn't see any cows in the photo, but.
But development means building space, paved driveways, roadways,
Shopping
shopping center. It just means the building themselves, not like the house in 2 acres.
The National Land Cover Data Set takes satellite imagery and interpolates what's there on the ground.
Probably half of that, one of those percents, Chittenden County.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But it's just the buildings in that themselves.
It's
The highway.
the reflection of the surfaces. So we'll have back roads, houses, buildings. In my mind, what's represented here is a rough approximation of where the built environment is. That, in my mind, would fall under the 2% development figure here.
It seems like it'd be higher.
How could it be? When you go home, what do you see?
Yeah, no, right. But it just seems like 2%, like if you said even 10%, just, yeah. I'm encouraged by it, actually. But that's,
Well, yeah, but we're never given the true numbers, because we gotta save the world. And if we're gonna save the world, there's gotta be more than 2% of us.
But I'm just trying to figure that out because, if it's, your lawn is not included.
right.
Well, maybe
my
that's under
house is.
3%. Is
Yes,
that under the
right.
3% is lawn?
It is interesting, yeah.
Lawns are likely not, in the resolution of that data set, you can go to all sorts, so you can pay all sorts of money and get down to really granular data, and you can map
Yeah.
high density pervious surface, low density pervious surface. You can get very incisive in this. That data set that they use is pretty coarse. And so I don't think it's inclusive of lawns per se.
Yeah.
Right, I was just trying to
I bet
understand.
it includes both interstates, so.
It does.
Yeah.
It better.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
federal government did that to us. They're saving us.
Maybe it's like plus or minus 5%. Maybe there's like a fudge factor here. that
Bobby
we-
wants it at 1% by the. All right.
Well, I mean, you gotta be real,
Yeah.
sometimes you can think kind of differently.
Yeah.
But when
No,
it's
this is
got-
interesting, yeah.
I think that interstate is developed, but
Absolutely.
does that include the median in between or?
Well, it's kind of what interesting when we
Yeah,
served,
farm
I don't know if you remember, we used to be on natural resource and energy.
can't remember.
No, but then Snyder would come in and he'd say that, all this forest is disappearing. And then we'd look at forest numbers. And that's why just different measurements, different graphs. I'm easily confused, Bobby,
You ought to come up my way. The forests are growing like heck. The farms are gone and all those farms are growing up to
Well, this is helpful.
scrub trees too.
We lost the map. Brian.
You did.
Okay,
I'm
Ron.
trying to hide the taskbar on the bottom so you
Oh, I
can see
see.
the
Okay,
sources.
sort
You
of.
don't have to look at all of
Well, we can also find it online.
my jump. You can,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
we're not-
probably in our packet or something.
Great. All right. I will share again.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we aren't gonna
There we
save the
go.
world if you don't get going here.
All right. I'm not known for brevity,
brevity.
but I will attempt to hurry up. Okay. Ag Ecosystem Subcommittee was created by the Global Warming Solutions Act. It was charged to look at mitigation resilience needs for the natural working lands. A lot of members from the Climate Council and then other ad hoc members that applied and joined. A lot of important work and discussions were had, and recommendations are placed in 3 sections in the initial climate action plan. It was published, as everyone knows, December 2021. So this is just a bit of a review and overview, maybe for new members to the committee, about where you can find the specific recommendations. If you're looking for agriculture and mitigation, that's section 11.4. If you're looking for adaptation and resilience, which includes ag as well as forest and other lands, you can look for section 13. And then sequestration and storing of carbon, you will find in section 14 of the climate action plan. So just an overview summary of the UVM climate assessment at the Gunn Institute, looking at changes in Vermont's climate. Over the 30 years they looked at, the Green Mountain State warmed nearly 2 degrees with a 21% jump in precipitation. So climate change is here, it's getting warmer, but the effects are interactive. That warmth and precip isn't being distributed in a nice, even, soft, gentle rain. What we're seeing are more intense episodic deluges as well as droughts that are happening throughout the state.
You said over the last 30 years.
That, in my memory, is the time scale that the climate assessment looked at.
So you might get a completely different view if it was over 100 years or even 200 years, if that was possible to do.
Absolutely.
I'm just pointing out, it seems.
Sure.
That's my question, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can change that on there.
Yep, and I have decadal averages of precipitation coming up in a future slide, and so you can see kind of the changes over the past 100 years, because depending on the time scale which you look at, the changes are narrow or very significant.
Yep. Thank you.
Contextualizing Vermont in the United States. This is mapping that was done published in New York Times, kind of representing what climate impacts are most going to look like where you live. And paired side by side here is the food flows on the right-hand side, showing the transportation networks of where food is produced and distributed. And on the left-hand side, the representation of the most acute forms of climate change that regions of the country will see, where the vast majority of food is currently produced. Wildfires and water stress are predicted to become, and in some ways are, becoming more pronounced in those areas. And so as we look to building a resilient food system, there's a lot of extreme rainfall is certainly one that we will see more of in the Northeast, but precipitation, we won't. Precipitation is important for growing food, of course, and that's something that Vermont has potentially competitive advantages in compared to the rest of the country, depending on the time scale you're looking at.
So we know, is this accurate, that Vermont will, going forward, let's say the next decade, get more rain? Is that what you're saying in part? Like our drought, given climate mapping and stuff, climate change, we're not likely to experience the droughts, but more the rain.
So
Or is that just
this is the
can't
punch.
even-
This is the
yeah.
punchline of this
Yeah.
slide, which is the decadal averages of precipitation. You can see it's been increasing above the average since the 1970s. But to your question, and the answer is no, the distribution of rainfall is not going to be felt evenly. This is from the UVM climate assessment on the bottom, and it shows that there's actually by 2050, a decrease in the percent of annual precipitation that's expected during those growing months that are most important. With the additional precipitation coming in January and December when not much is growing. So yes, more rainfall, but as we saw this past year, regions of the state, we are a very hilly state, kind of long, very significant droughts in southern Vermont, which caused significant agricultural impacts, and whereas other regions of the state had more than enough rainfall.
Yeah.
The thing that's important to note about the prediction for 2050 and the episodic droughts that are predicted to occur more frequently in the summer months is that 10% change in precip, we're starting from about 42 inches of precipitation. So more than enough to grow a saleable crop. Irrigation may become more necessary as a climate resilience tool, but we're still going to get rainfall, but it is predicted to be less, and it's going to be those gaps between rainfall events that is going to cause a lot of challenges for the vegetable and specialty crop growers, as well as sometimes the hay regrowth in the middle of the season. So yes, we'll be getting more rainfall. It won't be nice and evenly distributed.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know, Ryan, if other states have the same issue as we do about dredging their rivers, about you're supposed to let the water flow where it may and not keep the river channels open, because up north our water all runs over to St. Albans Bay, and our rivers are all full of gravel from up at JP, and every mountain and hillside up there, the gravel goes down with the rain and the rainwater, and it keeps washing down the river, and the river keeps getting wider, and the water, of course, gets warmer, and by the time it gets to St. Albans Bay, it's, I bet, 2 or 3 degrees warmer than when it left or went by my house in Troy. And it's kind of raising heck in Champlain, because they're getting all this junk growing there. And if so, if the water going in is warmer because we aren't taking care of our stream beds, what else are you gonna get other than silt and stuff going into the lake at a warmer temperature and growing algae and everything else? I don't know if my pea brain is right, but
It's interesting.
I know if I take a hot cup of coffee
All right.
and dump it in my eating bowl like he's got over there, I can drink that pretty quick. Whereas if I drink it out of a cup, it still stays hot. So if you spread it out, it's going to cool it. It'll cool it down if it's hot, but if it's cold and you put it in there, it's going to warm it up over time. Is there any studies on any of that?
I get to refer you to DEC on that one, their rivers program. I don't have a good answer nor the subject matter expertise to answer that in any way other than, from previous work, understanding that Vermont's rivers are geologically young or geomorphically young. So they're going to be moving and they're not really settled and stable. The management therein for aquatic fish habitat is a question that is regulated a number of different ways, from both withdrawal as well as stream alteration, for which DEC oversees that throughout a number of their programs. So unfortunately, I gotta defer to them for responses on that. But the point stands that there's going to be a lot of multifaceted impacts from climate change And the Agriculture and Ecosystem Subcommittee looked towards the natural and working lands as a way to implement natural climate solutions that can help to build resilience in the face of extreme weather events. Where a river may silt in, when we have those deluges, the scouring effect from that will move that silt down the river as well. So I think it's a balance, and I don't have a comment on how that's managed in the state. Not my area of expertise. I apologize. So moving into the agricultural context, this is a graphic on the left from the USDA NRCS, which talks about moving into the importance of soils and how we manage our soils. Increases in organic matter. Every 1% increase in soil organic matter can hold between 20 and 28,000, about 25,000 gallons of available soil water per acre. So when we have a drought, if you have high organic matter, it will be able to retain that water that falls. In times of deluge and too much rain, the good soil structure, the organic matter, the aggregates will enable water to infiltrate down through and not flash and run off the soil surface. And what we have on the right-hand side is a comparison of a clay soil. The left-hand side is conventional tillage, so moldboard plow and harrows, and on the right is long-term no-till. And that's just an example of what a healthy soil can do when fully saturated in submerged in water. It doesn't break apart, it's held together. There's a lot of aggregate stability. The glues from the soil biology hold it all together. And that's kind of the end point that, so farming for soil health can bring as a benefit.
It'll get that clear.
It doesn't, yeah, it's really incredible. You see some of these demonstrations, and I have a demonstration here if you want to watch a video. This is from University of North Dakota. It's about a minute. It does a really good job of, let's see, I'm gonna have to stop sharing and share again. So I apologize. Let's see if this will work again.
You never got to see videos in natural resources?
Never saw any.
He doesn't remember that.
Never saw what?
Any of this.
Never saw any of this.
Oh, no, I mean, we're bad.
All right, let's see if we get some volume here.
Simulator to talk about water movement into soil. So in these 4 pans, we have the same soil type, just in different managements. In the pans, we have moldboard plow, CRP, recently converted CRP to cropland, and 15 years of no-till. So
Right, just to pause here, we're going from left to right.
Right.
we'll see is how water moves across the surface in these front bins and how water moves through the soil and the bins behind it. As you can see, this is simulating a pounding rain on some of these different soil management systems. So you can see on the moldboard plow pan, that soil is running off the surface and it's actually quite muddy in that first jug. Underneath, there's very little water that's moving through that soil deeper into the soil profile. On the CRP, you can see that the water running off of the surface is quite clear, and a lot of that water is infiltrating through that soil, which would recharge deeper in the soil profile. And the recently converted CRP, some of that disturbance is leading to a little bit of runoff, but then also water moving through that soil still infiltrating. On the last pan, we have wheat on a 15-year no-till soil. And you can see that the water that is running off is very clear, but most of the water is actually moving through that soil and infiltrating deeper into the soil profile. After 1 inch of water in this demonstration, you can see how the water either moves across the surface or down through the soil profile. You can catch this demonstration on the NDSU Soil Health Bus Tour taking place.
Well, the bus tour was in North Dakota in 2018, so we may have missed it. But the
That's really
demonstration,
interesting. Yeah.
How deep is the soil sample there?
it's about 2-3 inches.
Oh, okay.
Of soil in there. And so at USDA, NRCS, UVM Extension, both have these mobile rainfall simulators.
Yeah.
And so when they do field days, they can go around and dig up different areas of a farm and use this as a live demonstration to articulate the benefits of farming for soil health.
Great.
You know, we talk about the soil aggregate stability being able to hold together. And as you can see here, you know, the moldboard plow, if you can see my cursor, right, all that's just splashing off is carrying that sediment with it. So that's where, you know, a lot of the water quality considerations come from. On the right-hand side, the runoff from a no-till system is rather clear, and there's significant movement down through the soil profile. Same with kind of an unmanaged conservation reserve program. And so this is a really, like, whether it's a slake test, that was a previous one where you put the soil in water and you just watch it not fall apart, to this, it's very visual why farming for soil health is so important, both in the water space, but also has significant co-benefits for climate, which I'll hopefully dive into.
You take, the old farms where they only had maybe 5 acres of corn and, or so, and the rest was all hay fields. You got nice clean water other than off that small portion where the corn.
What we'll do today is
You rotated more often, these places that have, but what it speaks to is that we probably don't have enough grants for farmers to move to no-till, cedars.
Well, we gotta figure, we do cover cropping and that gets put in to help prevent runoff. And we do manure injection, so there's no plowing.
We're getting better.
We do no-till on the corn,
Yeah.
so you aren't ripping up all the soil, just where the corn goes. And have you done any of these tests on those types of fields? Like a cornfield with no-till? And
Yes, edge of field studies, there's significant long-term studies in Vermont, which have been conducted to attempt to understand how management affects runoff. And so that informs a lot of the modeling and assessment data that we have in the state, over 10 years of ongoing in-field trials with edge of field collection. This slide makes the connection between soil health and the watershed in which these fields sit. This is a study from Carrie Watson at the Gun Institute, UVM, which articulates the damage that was avoided at Middlebury because of upland waters and floodplains that were able to absorb the significant runoff from Tropical Storm Irene. Right, over $1.8 million of flood damages were avoided. When we do a remote sensing analysis of agricultural crop fields, we see that, well, not only are they managing floodplains, but over 50% of the wetlands in those watersheds are managed by farms. And when we talk about, yes, there were a lot of avoided economic damages in Middlebury, there were significant damages to crops within the watershed for farmers. So a lot of silting happened, and so you couldn't actually feed it to the cows because it was filled with dirt and debris. There are emergency conservation programs from the USDA to help offset some of those losses, but it didn't make farms whole. And so this is just intended to be a discussion point in, it's not a silo. It's not a farm and a floodplain and a wetland and forest, right? Very often farmers manage all of those, and you need an integrated, cohesive landscape to be able to have a resilient topography or landscape in the face of a changing climate. Another exciting new study that came out from University of Vermont Extension. This is about the state of soil health in Vermont. There's a lot of charts and words here, so I'll try to summarize it. But the opportunity here is over the next 20 years, so a medium-term solution. There is the annual opportunity for Vermont's corn and hay fields to sequester 937,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalents annually.
937?
Well, the exact figure from the study is 937,494,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalents annually. That is at that annual rate is the same as the emissions from 200,000 cars. And there's only about 190,000 passenger vehicles registered in Vermont. And this comes from both the study of the infield retention and sink and pool of carbon in the soils, as well as long-term studies at UVM that shows that organic matter percentage can increase year on year. Now, there is a theoretical finite saturation point that based on the soil type characteristics, you will eventually reach the maximum amount of carbon that can be stored in the soils. But on an annual basis, just from planting seeds, changing your tillage, changing your rotation, changing your nutrient management, farmers can have an immediate impact of taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and storing it in the soils. And so that's like an immediate benefit that can be contributed by agriculture, and they currently are. But this necessitates continued investments in supporting soil health practice adoption on farms.
And how much do the cars produce?
So the thought experiment they did is looking at the corn and hay, applying soil health practices to those acreages. They can sequester 937,000 metric tons, which is about the same rate as 200,000 cars. So that's all of the ag soils in the state. And so this next slide provides a bit of a framework. So this is from the 2017 ag census. We're going to have an update for 2022. It'll be coming out sometime this spring. And so we can track and see what changed within the 5-year span of the ag census. What I'm putting up here is that 937,000 metric tons comes from the harvested cropland and the permanent pasture. That's not including the total woodland, which is also something that farmers manage, whether it's active management for maple sap collection and maple syrup production, or just general forestry and silviculture practices. And this was another takeaway from this process, is that for every acre of cropland, whether it's pasture, hay, corn, farmers in Vermont manage another acre of forest land. And so thinking about farms as a whole unit, yes, you can look just at the different components of a farm to look at benefits and impacts. But taking a step back, there's a farm can manage multiple parts of the landscape all at once, and that's an important
Forest land, that must even work better than cropland, especially if nobody's in there but the animals.
I think so. Yes, total carbon storage, forests can store more. The Nature Conservancy in Canada did a meta-analysis of all natural and working lands mitigation opportunities that exist. So they looked at their oceans and tidal wetlands. They looked at forest practices. They looked at ag practices, and as well as afforestation and other. By 2030, no, 2050. 2030 or 2050. So on a shorter timeline than 100-year global warming potential, they found that agriculture in Canada was the largest potential source of mitigation benefit, because it can be an immediate sequestration, right? You plant rye seed for a cover crop, that's going to sequester carbon right there in the fall and spring. The benefits from planting trees can take many decades to accrue.
Yeah.
So you can get more total storage from forest, but in the short to medium term, there's a lot of potential from ag land. And the authors were surprised that they found that there was so much potential, that it was cost effective, and that it could have the most benefit. But that's what agriculture can present in the medium term when supporting the farm for those types of practices.
I'm sure the Senate Natural Resources Committee's invited you in to present this stuff.
I have not been invited this year to share this presentation this time.
I would have thought they would have you in long before now with all their work they're trying to accomplish.
Sure, the invitation is on its way.
Yeah, it's in the mail.
There you go.
It's in the mail one.
I'll keep an eye out. Great. Okay, so trying to stitch together again. I hope I'm not belaboring the point too much. But within the Climate Action Plan and the Global Warming Solutions Act, there are requirements for emissions reduction, right? Those are the enforceable standards. There are net zero targets. So that includes balancing emissions against sequestration. And there's also resilience goals. What I have here are what sometimes are thought of as two different strategies. But for agriculture, when you focus on the soils and supporting farmers to adapt to how they manage their soils, you can have co-benefits. You can have practices and farms that contribute to both mitigation as well as improving resilience. And resilience can be defined very broadly, from food security and food systems, the food production. The Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee like to look at viability of farms as an important resilience factor. They're delivering these ecosystem service benefits. But if they're not making a profit and they're all going out of business, that's definitely a concern for the long-term management of those agricultural soils, as there are, of course, development pressures and other pressures that are present. There's also the direct co-benefits that can be measured from implementing cover crop that provides watershed and flood resilience in the form of holding more water in those acres of agricultural land. So the ag soils were a major focus and lens because farmers are already working on it through clean water work, and you can derive both mitigation and resilience benefits from farmers adopting those practices. Within section 11.4 and section 14, I just wanted to, these are the bullet points of the types of strategies and program areas that the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee and then the Climate Council adopted are recommended for further enhancement. And the legislature appropriated $4.76 million of ARPA money last year to go towards ag climate. And so there's been an investment in these areas, and the Agency of Agriculture programs that exist that support these program areas are longstanding programs that will be bolstered with that additional monies. And I'll talk about some of those practices and programs in a bit more detail in a moment. Luckily, with Act 64 of 2015, Vermont's Clean Water Act, Agency of Agriculture, Agency of Natural Resources work together to come up with a tracking accounting system for phosphorus. And so this big complicated chart is tracking the conservation practice name. This is the corresponding USDA or state practice code, the year in which it was implemented. And these are just state and federal cost shared practices. Farmers are doing more than what's being cost shared, but this is just what we can track and account for. But over 300,000 acres of conservation practices have been implemented since state fiscal year 2016. And what we know from the tracking and accounting of those implemented conservation practices, as you saw in the kind of overview introduction from the whole agency team that was here in January, agriculture continues to produce the most measurable results, right? Over 95% of all phosphorus reductions that have been reported to the state have come from agriculture. They continue to be the most cost effective, a median price of less than $100 per kilogram of phosphorus, oftentimes magnitudes more inexpensive than other practices when you focus on those pasture and field-based practices.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, as we continue to do regenerative practices, it seems to me, if you're going through the grocery store and you want to buy local, it also seems to me that some people would like to pick something off the shelf that says these practices, this was grown on a farm where practices help sequester carbon. Is there any discussion around that? Because I do think, science is there without a doubt. A lot of these practices are really going to help our fight to mitigate, if we can, climate change in any way. Is that?
Yes, there are lots of labels
Okay.
that exist out there.
Right. I know anybody can put a label on anything.
They can.
Yeah.
The efforts that the state of Vermont has been engaged in is through the Vermont Environmental Stewardship Program,
Okay.
which is a program that's authorized in Chapter 215 and sought to provide social recognition for farms that are exceeding standards. So when we had a lot of focus groups with farmers, one quote in particular that I'll paraphrase, I can't do it exactly, but I got animal welfare certified, I've got organic, there's any number of environmental responsibility claims and labels that exist that you can put on your packaging if you qualify and you participate. What farmers were looking for was a sign and a way to show their neighbors that they are improving the environment locally. They wanted something to show their neighbors that their farm is benefiting water. And so that's where the Environmental Stewardship Program came from. It's been on hold as the Ecosystem Services Working Group did their work.
Mhm.
And now that there's a recommendation for a pilot program that follows a similar structure to the BEST program, we're going to again look at those standards and see if there's the opportunity for that sign to be associated with farmers that achieve certain practices. We may change the name in some of the graphics, but the
Yeah,
concept is.
That makes, yeah,
Be a little bit like farmer with distinction. or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
now
yeah.
Once in a while, you'll see.
yeah,
Some,
yeah.
but, you know, how many years have we been at this, Ryan? It's been a long, I mean, we've been working at this for a long time. About 10, 12 years.
Yeah, since I've been here.
'Cause, yeah, I mean, you've been with us, what, 7,
This is my 9th.
9? So, yeah, I mean, it's,
Healthy soils were enshrined as a definition, Act 64, 2015. There were multiple years of legislative discussion about what is regenerative farming. And that culminated in 2 bills in 2019, Act 83, which authorized the Camp Ecosystem Services Working Group, and then Act 64, 2019, which created the Vermont Environmental Stewardship Program. And so those programs, yeah, it took a lot of years to come to those definitions and framework. And the PES working group did its due diligence to look through all the options. And now that we have a recommendation, I think that's the intent, is to not only support farmers to adopt the practices, but to communicate back to Vermonters, look at the benefit that's being derived from all the investment farmers are making in their soil.
but if you think about it
Yeah.
deeply.
Yeah.
You know, we had all these acres, hundreds of thousands of acres of privately owned land.
Yeah.
And we had to convince those people, those owners, that these practices would work. I mean,
It would help them too.
there wasn't a blueprint that we could hand them and say, well, this is what happened in
Yeah.
New Hampshire,
Right, right,
you know, or New York.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
took a long time to get there.
I do like the idea of recognizing farms
It,
in some kind
they
of
worked hard.
prominent way, so people know,
Yeah.
particularly as we, doing carbon sequestration and things like that.
Well, when you talk about carbon, you only said one thing wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
The
right.
number of registered vehicles in the state
Yeah.
is
Maybe we can get
748,000.
Ryan
I said
back.
passenger vehicles.
Passenger vehicles is registered is 400 and
Well,
408.
Single- I'm happy to share.
And I'm just quoting the 2022 fact book from AOT.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look to correct that. My most recent look at the V-Trans data for privately owned passenger vehicles was around 200,000, but can absolutely look into that. I appreciate that.
We have some members that have to go to another meeting.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you.
Is there sometime,
Okay, thank you.
And 50 some odd thousand pickup trucks.
is there sometime, maybe next week, we could get you back, Ryan?
That'd be great.
Sure, I'd be happy to come back at the committee's convenience.
I don't know how far you're into your thing, your report, but I probably not too far.
That is the perfect stopping point, because the next part is a discussion about, we've talked all about the benefits of soil sequestration and the multiple benefits it can have. The next part is about, well, what's actually tracked in the emissions inventory, and what we're looking at doesn't include agricultural soils. And so it's a discussion of what's being tracked, what mitigations opportunity exists there, and then the work the state's undertaking to kind of investigate that, the research that's underway to examine how the emissions inventory is conducted for agriculture in the state of Vermont. So I think this is a great stuff.
Well, thanks for coming over today, and we should have scheduled you more time.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
We asked too many questions.
Well,
All right,
Thank you.
tricky to come back and
Oh, yeah.
finish this.
yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be
next
great.
week, we'll try to get you back in while this is still fresh.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Maybe you could
I was
invite,
waiting for this.
maybe you could invite your former chair.
I only bring that up because